Greetings fanboys and fangirls, Jared here with another video review from Fanboys Forever. And today I'm bringing you, as far as I know, the very first video review of Skeletor here from the 1987 Masters of the Universe movie on YouTube. And no, this is not the Masters of the Universe Classics version that we got several years ago from Super 7. This is instead the Masterverse version. Of course, this is the modern line that we have here in 2022, and this should be hitting right in the first month of 2023. And I've been so very much looking forward to this figure because I'm just kind of amazed that they went ahead and did it. And I can't wait to get into how this thing compares with the Classics version, how faithful it is to the movie. It's just going to be an interesting review, and I can't wait to get into it with you. But before I begin, I was able to acquire this figure from Amazon when they accidentally put the pre-order listing up for it early before we even knew it was a movie Skeletor. Thankfully, somebody on Twitter noticed the listing and I was able to get in there, and sure enough, I've gotten it early. But before we begin, I would like to ask that anybody who's enjoying the review so far, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out here at Fanboys Forever, and you're always appreciated. Also, be sure to like the video and leave a comment down below letting me know what you thought of the movie Skeletor from Masterverse. With all that good stuff out of the way, let's begin. First of all, we'll just look at the packaging. The presentation is very much like any of the other deluxes that we see in the line. It's a really kind of oversized box. It's very wide. Chances are it's a little too big, honestly, when the truth is you could probably get away with something much smaller. But it does do a good job of highlighting all the different accessories. Other than that, you just have the name of the figure. Nothing about the movie, it just says Skeletor. Skeletor, the evil tyrant of Eternia. And on the back, this is where the real winner is. I love this artwork so much. And it will connect to He-Man and make kind of a display whenever I'm able to get that figure, so I'm really looking forward to that. The bio is really interesting too because it pretty much just describes the story of the 87 movie. Bottom's nothing to write home about, but if you need that UPC, here it is. Alright, well that's enough talking about the packaging. Let's get them out. The very best way to open this guy up is actually from the top flap, because you only have to remove one tab of tape, a lesson that for some reason I wasn't learning the first few that I opened up, but it didn't matter because I didn't want to save the packaging. Here I actually do, by the power of Grayskull.
Tell me about the loneliness of good He-Man. Is it equal to the loneliness of evil?
And here he is right out of the packaging, Skeletor. So let's go ahead and talk about the history of just movie Skeletor in general. I think that most of us know, who have been in the fandom for a while, that when the original 1987 movie came out, it wasn't very successful at all, but we can say definitively that there was never a movie Skeletor figure. And I know a lot of people were interested in it even then, because Frank Langella's performance as Skeletor is incredible in the movie. If you have never watched the movie, I highly suggest you go into it with an open mind. It isn't exactly like the source material. They take some liberties, but I still get such a huge kick out of the 1987 Masters of the Universe movie. And one of the main reasons is because the Frank Langella Skeletor character is just so incredibly well done, and it's something that I hold near and dear to my heart. So getting a figural form of that performance has always been really important to me. Of course, this is not the first time that this has been done, and we'll be talking a little bit later about the Masters of the Universe Classics version. But before we do that, let's just go ahead and look at this figure on its own and on its own merits. Looking at sculpt, you really have a pretty faithful rendition of that Langella Skeletor. I think starting with the head sculpt, you can really say that they did a great job here. It really does look like Frank Langella's face mask that he wore. Definitely all the little wrinkles and little extra details are in there. I especially like what they captured with the face here and the kind of bits of bone all around the eyes. And of course, in the movie, they didn't paint any black really around the eyes. It's just white leading all the way up to the eyeballs, which I always thought was interesting. But what I really appreciate is at the mouth, it's slightly open, and you can see the two big fangs right there on Skeletor, which is very accurate to how he appeared in the film. And I think just that resting face really does a lot. And he certainly looks better than any of the pictures that I've seen of, say, He-Man from this series. I think that this really does get the job done. And we'll see later how that compares with the Classics version. Moving on down, you have Skeletor's chest and shoulder armor. Now, obviously, I think that we can easily see that this guy is way more buffed out than Frank Langella was as Skeletor. Definitely, I think it's the shoulders being so big, since these pads are just attached to your more basic Masterverse body, and I think that that's what makes the shoulders really big. The chest isn't so out of whack, though, because if we move the little sash bits here, we can see that it's got all those ridges and all those little extra techie bits that Skeletor had on his armor in the '87 movie. And they do a really good job of it. It really looks like that they had gotten a hold of some very accurate kind of source material, as I'm seeing a whole lot of just intricacies here that probably would have helped me when I did my own amateur painting of the Masters of the Universe movie. The belt, looking kind of like a samurai or daimyo kind of belt, is so ornate and cool looking. I love the design on it. I've never really been 100% sure what the visual is or what it's trying to communicate, but I just really like it. Moving on down, we also have these sash bits, and this is kind of like a scarf almost, and I'll show you how it works a little bit later. But you can see that they even have individual little imprints sculpted in each one, some of them looking like animal faces almost, some of them looking like skulls, some of them looking like symbols, and they kind of change, and even the paint changes as we go. Now on down to the skirt section. Again, you have all of these intricacies in the sculpting with all these different symbols, and it doesn't just do the front, it even goes around to the side right here. I'm very impressed with what they were able to do. I'm also very impressed with this texture right here. You can see all those little grooves and details right there. The cod piece here is accurate to the film because it has all those ridges in it. Interestingly, you go on down and you can see that Skeletor's boots are very much intact. In the movie, he had little skulls at the top, and they do that here. And then on the back, we can actually see that even though we have a soft goods cape, there is a sculpted piece that simulates the kind of overhang that he has in the film, with a little kind of medallion eye looking almost like the eye of Agamotto that Doctor Strange has. Of course, we can't forget about the gauntlets and the claws or fingernails here. These are indeed very accurate to the film, and they're Kirby-esque looking gauntlets. Of course, the movie is very much inspired, I think, by the work of Jack Kirby, and there's a lot of Kirby-esque visuals throughout the film. So I think sculpturally, this is a real win. Much better than I would have imagined that they would have been able to have done with the source material, actually. Especially for what amounts to a mass market toy that will very well could be on like Walmart shelves. Not only that, but we have to discuss the paint job, which will probably be one of the more controversial aspects of the figure. I think a lot of people, their first impression looking at the figure will probably be to kind of question some of Mattel's decision making here, particularly when it comes to a couple of things. Number one, the hood and the cape and the cloak here being a burgundy and not black. And number two, the shoulder pads and the breastplate being more of this purple and kind of this shiny purple with red accents. Well, I probably would have questioned that too had I not really been a seeker of information about that original '87 movie and always looking for new behind the scenes stuff, and I hadn't seen pictures like this one. And you can see very clearly that when not processed and whatever film stock they were using, when not lit the specific way that his scenes are in the film, you can clearly see there's all kinds of red and purple sheen on that breastplate and the shoulder pads, and you can especially see that indeed the cape and the hood were more of a burgundy. It wasn't all just black. Now the funny thing is, it does read that way in the actual film. It reads as kind of a big black bodysuit with shiny bits. And if you wanted more of that sort of version, I definitely understand that, because that's definitely what you perceive when you watch the movie and any home video version of it. But I am telling you that Mattel, with their access to a lot of the props and costumes and behind the scenes photos, I think that they were as accurate as they just about could be here. And this is another case like when Mattel did the old General Zod 12-inch figure on Matty Collector, and he had red highlights on his outfit, and people were like, wait a minute. But the truth is, if you go and look at the actual outfit on any of those Warner Brothers tours or whatever, sure enough, it was red and shiny on those bits on the suit. So it's just one of those funny tricks of light. Skeletor's articulation is pretty much what you would expect. You can get the head to go left and right. There's a little bit of up and down. There's not much up, it's mostly down, but it doesn't really hold because of the hard sculpted piece under. So you're pretty much just looking at left and right, and it can't even go very far that way because the back of the hood does some funny things. With the shoulder pads up here, of course, you're going to have a little bit of articulation kind of hindered, but you can still get almost 90 degrees, but I mean, it's pretty decent for what it is. You do get a swivel right up here above the bicep, so that's handy. Of course, we do get a double jointed elbow. It is kind of hard to use because Skeletor is so jacked in this figure that the bicep is just about too big and goes against the edge of the gauntlets, which are really large, and you kind of end up just knocking them against each other, but at least he can get 90 degrees. He does not have a swivel at that gauntlet, even though it looks like he would. Instead, you can just swivel at the wrist, and thankfully this hand has an upwards hinge that allows you to kind of pivot it this way because you need that with his staff. The other hand has a hinge that goes the other way in, and at the diaphragm here you have up and down movement, which really works pretty well, and it's just the basic body underneath there. You also have some side-to-side movement, which works really well. You do have a waist swivel, and you can see that the belt is just kind of a piece that glides over top. I'm sure if you wanted to, you could probably adjust this down lower, but this is kind of as far down as I can get it, and it does have a habit of kind of riding up on you as you pose it, and you'll see that happen throughout this review. So you always, kind of before photography, you always want to adjust that down a little bit, but it's easy to forget about. On down here, it's definitely a curiosity about what this skirt piece will do. And let's see. You can see that when you work with the skirt piece, it's molded pretty closely. You can get pretty well splits. I mean, it's hilarious to see Langella Skeletor do this, but he holds it. So that's not bad, in my opinion. Now, he can kick way out, and it really doesn't inhibit that either because they made sure to sculpt it more to the side. You can even do some fancy little things like this, and you can prop it up against the arm. So if you want that, it can look like that's just flowing in the wind. So I think Mattel did a really good job incorporating this and still keeping a huge amount of the articulation. There really isn't hardly a compromise here, and I thought there would be. Now, there's also a thigh swivel that I think we're all kind of used to at this point. You also get a double jointed knee right there. Again, that's just a mainstay of the Masterverse line. I'm really glad they're not compromising articulation. We also have a swivel at the top of the boot. We have a great hinge at the ankle, and we have plenty of rocker ankle pivot. So that means if you want to get him in a wider pose than he was ever in the movie, you can totally do that, and you're not going to have any trouble getting him to hold those. He's really well articulated, I have to say, and the articulation is much more versatile than you might expect for this figure. So definitely congratulations are in order for Mattel on this, because I think they did a fine job adding in as much articulation as possible to this guy. There's been very little sacrificed. Before we get into accessories, it's definitely going to be fun to talk about some of the ins and outs of the construction of the figure. One of the things that I definitely want to highlight is the ability to, yes, pop the head off, which of course can lead to all kinds of fun combinations and things. But that means that there's kind of a whole system going on in here. It's really interesting. There's this piece, which is your plastic kind of piece that we talked about earlier. You have the soft goods cape piece, and I highly suggest that you take the insides of this and spread it out and then replace everything, because mine was all bunched up and doing crazy things, and it looks better when you have a more even flow. So that just comes right off, and now you're left with this kind of scarf sash piece right here. You can totally take it off if you want to, meaning that if you wanted it, Skeletor could just kind of, I guess, look a little more traditional, but it's hilarious because you have the edges of the hood flaring out because they need to be setting on something. So if you didn't want the cape, I suppose you could have his cape piece on there anyway and put this on, and it kind of solves that whole issue. So if you want that to have him in a more battle ready look, you can totally do that, and it actually looks really nice, almost as if this would be Skeletor's battle outfit. Now, interestingly, they have the cape setting on top of the scarf piece, but I personally think it would be a lot better the other way, because what happens is that causes this to ride up when it shouldn't, and I want this to actually stay flush. So what you can end up doing is using the scarf piece to make it stay down like it's supposed to. And once you have that how you like it, you can then add the hard cape piece and then add the head. So I definitely believe it's a case where you can improve the look a little bit by doing that. Let's go over accessories just really quickly.
I must possess all, or I possess nothing.
Of course, he comes with his awesome staff. I've always loved the design of the Havoc staff from the '87 movie. The sculpting is very intricate here, and just the design of it has been captured very well with what almost looks like the rays of the sun or energy or something emanating from the Havoc staff. Now mine's slightly warped here on the side, nothing that a little hot water can't fix. Moving on down, you got some bolts and things and little hooks, and then you have kind of the sharper end. So I think they did a good job here. It is obvious that a little bit of paint has been skimped on because it's mostly two different shades of plastic with maybe a slight bit of highlighting up here. There's definitely more ornate paint detail that could have gone into this accessory, but it still definitely gets the job done. And Skeletor looks awesome holding it. There's very few moments in the film where Skeletor is without this giant staff, it seems, at least to the best of my memory. So I do think it's very important to have. One of the other accessories he comes with is Skeletor's power sword, or well, his version, his battle sword, whatever you want to say it is. I think this is really well done. It has some great sculptural detail right there with these almost gnarly wings and the skull head right there on both sides. Great textural detail on the handle, and we have the blade, which is of course, you know, your basic kind of blade that we've seen in the Masterverse line with that kind of shiny finish. I do have a little bit of stray paint or something here, but that could easily be just wiped off. He doesn't have a sheath for the sword. It's also a very long and very broad sword, so it looks really nice when you have the staff in one hand and the sword in the other. It gives a very imposing effect, I think. He does come with a couple of alternate hands, one of them with his hand open over here for the side, as is a tradition with Masterverse, and a fisted hand. Of course, we don't see Skeletor punch very much in the movie, but it is there if you want it. Of course, the MacGuffin of the film is Skeletor questing after the cosmic key, which can grant you interdimensional travel. Of course, a thorn in Skeletor's side as he tries to reacquire it from Gwildor. I think this is a really good version of the cosmic key. For one, we had the cosmic key in the Masters Universe Classics line that was really maybe a little too large, but it had a lot of really intricate detail on it. This probably isn't quite as detailed, but I think it gets across the major parts of the cosmic key and is cast in some really nice colors, and I think in this part they do a good job of making it look gold. And it has the really nice little handle on the side. It kind of has that loop there, and they did go to great pains to make sure that sculpturally anyway, even if they couldn't capture every single paint detail, that it really did look nice. If you want Skeletor to hold it, all you have to do is take the loop right there, and it works very nicely. All we need is Gwildor's little grappling hook thing to grab it right before Skeletor can get it. Or maybe that's He-Man's grappling hook. It's always such a funny shot to me. All right, so I know that a lot of people have been waiting for this particular part of the review, and that's the comparison with the Masters of the Universe Classics versions. Of course, this was a big event when they finally announced that figure, and definitely I thought would probably be the only chance to own movie Skeletor, but funny how things work out sometimes, right? And here he is with his Masters of the Universe Classics counterpart. Now, there's a few things that stand out to me just immediately when seeing them side by side. Some really surprising things. I definitely think that paint job wise, more people are going to look at this one and say that the more subtle work is more accurate to the film, or at least what you see on film for the costumes, colors itself. And so I definitely think that's going to be kind of a generalized statement that you're going to see quite a bit from anybody looking at it. However, there's a couple of other things that this gets right. I think sculpt-wise, this gets quite a bit more right than this one does. If you're looking for something that is just a straight up interpretation of the movie, for one thing, it's kind of funny that they're like practically exactly the same height. So that's just a funny little note. But if you just look at the armor layout, the sash, I think, and even things like the little skirt, and especially the head sculpt and hood, it's this guy. I mean, I love Masters of the Universe Classics, love what the Horsemen did for that line, and it's probably always going to be my favorite toy line of all time. I'm not sure anything could ever change that. But I'd be a fool not to look at this and say, okay, well, just look at them in the face and see which one brings you straight to the movie. And it's this one. This is a little bit more of a comic booky or cartoony interpretation. And when I say that, that is not a slight against the Four Horsemen. That is just a stylistic thing. I'm not saying it looks bad in any way. I'm saying it's just a little more stylized. And maybe these guys were a little more afraid to get close to that Langella likeness, and these guys were willing to fly a little closer to the sun. So I do think that's interesting. I will say that if we go up just a little, the Horseman does beat Masterverse to death with the staff. I mean, the staff is so much better. And the Classics release, if you look at it, just the intricate detail and the sharpness of the sculpt, the paint applications throughout, it's a much better accessory, even down to just going to the bottom of it and looking at things like the painted details here versus here. There's no comparison. I guess what I'm telling you is these go for crazy money, and I'm really glad I have mine because I love those figures in that subline. However, I certainly would not pay a fortune for this one anymore. I would just go with this one. If you don't like the colors, just dye it or something. All right, let's go ahead and just compare him to a couple of others. I, of course, want to show him alongside of the Masters of the Universe Classics versions of some of the villains from the film, like Sarad. I think that looks really good, even if Sarad is maybe a little big there. Of course, there's Blade, and don't forget, Blade's been waiting a long time for this. I do think the scale is really nice here. Yeah, I think that worked. You have car gear. The scale is really nice with this one as well. And God Skeletor. So we know that at the end of the movie, Skeletor gets a big upgrade, definitely inspired by that Jack Kirby drawn issue of Captain America where Red Skull gets the Cosmic Cube upgrade. I think this is the better of the two Skeletor figures from Classics. This has a much better likeness to Langella for whatever reason, or actually Langella's stunt guy, I guess the mask, whatever you want to say. And it becomes much harder to discern which one is better. I think these two guys actually look like they're more companion pieces in some ways than the standard movie Skeletor did in Classics with him. So I actually think these two make a really nice pair. And with the scale being so similar, you can fudge it like no problem. I think it's obvious that, we're going to get the God version of this guy too. I mean, it's just a repaint with a new head and a slightly different sash piece. And in terms of movie figures, we will look at one more in comparison, and that is the Four Horsemen Studios 87 He-Man from the Classics line. I still love this figure. It's one of my favorite figures in my entire collection. Good luck to the new one, when I get my hands on it. I hope it turns out well, but it's really hard to argue with this. I think this is an incredible looking figure, and I actually think this looks really nice too because, you've got the gigantic Dolph Lundgren. He's going to be a little bit bigger than Langella, so I definitely think that's nice. And just for fun, here he is alongside of a New Eternia Skeletor. Interestingly, this guy is a little bit taller. And here is the classic Skeletor head from the New Eternia Skeletor figure. And it looks pretty good on him, but the color of the hood doesn't really match. So that's something maybe some enterprising customizer could work out. Of course, you can have a little bit of fun with the old Skeletor body as well. The hood piece and definitely the cape piece set a little funny on this. So I guess if you took this off, but then it would look a little weird without the vest. And just to give kind of a funny representation of what Origins movie Skeletor could be like, I could put a little more effort into this, but just so you can see it, yeah, you know, you could pop it on here, and if you were willing, you could definitely work on things and go from there. But I'm saying that I bet that there's going to be one of these down the pipeline, so let's just wait and see. And just for fun, because why not, here is the 40th anniversary He-Man alongside of Skeletor. Of course, this is a big beast of a figure. He's going to be a little bit bigger than Skeletor. In the end, I think it's fairly obvious that there's not many more ways I can explain it, but to say that this figure is a lot more successful than I even thought it would be. I think that overall, what they did really works, especially if you consider that even if the colors seem a little more blown out than you might anticipate, that it is fairly accurate to that original costume. And if given the correct light, which may be lower lighting, rather than a review situation like this for photography, you're going to get something fairly accurate. That, along with the effective accessories, I think makes it a really great pickup, especially for people that are interested in movie Skeletor. And it does indeed allow you to have a very reasonably priced version of it without having to go to the secondary market for the old classics version. I am really pleased with this, and I do consider it in many ways to be an upgrade over the old version, so good for them. You know, I think the future is really bright for this particular subline of Masterverse figures. I definitely want to see them get into some new stuff that we've not seen represented from the film before. I would love to see movie Beastman or movie Evil Lyn. I think either one of those would be really exciting releases. Not to mention all of the actual heroic masters that I would love to see made, like Teela and Man-at-Arms. So I would definitely say that this one is a pickup, even at the deluxe price point, even without getting maybe as many accessories as you should get. I think an alternative head would have been much appreciated for this guy, even if it was just more of a classical Skeletor head. I think that would have been very reasonable, cast in white rather than yellow. I think that to have matched He-Man, who will be coming with a more standard classic He-Man head, I think that would have been the thing that is definitely missing here. But other than that, it's definitely a great looking figure. Alright friends, before you go, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button and that like button. Be sure to share the video around so that people can get as early a look at this figure as possible. And of course, make sure that you comment down below and let me know what you think about this Skeletor figure, particularly how it compares to the old classics version. Are you surprised that they never made one in the 80s? I, of course, would love to see this guy done in Origins, and I think a lot of people are definitely waiting for that. And as always, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.